I think the 9 to 5, 5 days a week is dead.
Yeah, me too.
Frankly.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm not mourning.
No. James Reed, absolutely delighted to have you on the Purpose-Led Leadership podcast. You probably don't need any introduction, but just give us an overview of your journey from school all the way through to now, and we'll dive into some elements of that.
Hello, Chris. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast. Well, journey. Yeah, I think of life as a journey, and I like to sort of imagine myself as an explorer. So I think it's about learning all the way, isn't it? And I think from the day we're born, we emerge knowing nothing, and we're sort of learning, whether it's to eat, to walk, to speak, and then you continue that process. I think in life and at work, and I suppose I've spent the last 30 years plus working in recruitment, so I've learned quite a bit about that. But before that, I worked in aid work. I worked at the BBC for a while doing program production. I worked in advertising at Saatchi & Saatchi. And my first sort of formal job was working for the Body Shop, which was founded by the wonderful entrepreneur, Anita Roddick.
Of course, yes.
And her husband, Gordon. And I worked for them, in my early 20s. So I've learned, from all these different experiences along the way. And I think, you learn so much at school and you learn so much at business school, but you can learn so much, out there by trying things, by exploring life in general. And so I don't think, and sometimes you have to unlearn things that you've learned. So I think it's important, I think, to keep an open mind and to keep traveling on that journey, to try not to get stuck.
Sure. The unlearning is important, isn't it? Because I think how we're managed, how we're schooled, how we're educated, how we're parented has a massive effect on how we act in our own lives. Would you say that recruitment itself is a good barometer for life, and why?
Well, I love recruitment, and I suppose I was born into it because my father was a recruiter and started Reed, at the age of 26 in Hounslow with £75, and
wow.
he and the rest of us have grown the company from then. So it's sort of something I really grew up with. So I suppose I consider myself a lifer when it comes to recruitment. And I don't want to retire. I want to continue. I want to keep learning, and I want to continue working with people and helping people progress their lives and careers, because I find that incredibly rewarding, and I really enjoy it, and I feel very lucky to have the job that I have. So I think, recruitment does cover all aspects of life, really, doesn't it? It's such a sort of people-oriented activity, and every person's journey, as you just called it, is different.
Yes.
So sort of trying to understand that person, what their priorities are, what their hopes and dreams are, I think is really important. And, that's what we seek to do, and with the people who join our business, and also more widely, obviously, with our candidates and applicants.
I agree. There seems to be a general misconception outside the sector about recruitment. I think there's a hell of a lot of emotional intelligence required to be successful at it, because you're not dealing with an inanimate object, you're dealing with people who can say yes or no, and you have to, you can be a specialist in recruitment, and that takes you so far, but I think you need to be a specialist in people, right?
Definitely, yeah. And people are the most important thing in business. So I think recruitment is the most important function in business, because every business that's growing has got to add to the team. And I genuinely believe that. And I think businesses that overlook that or disregard that do so at their peril. And businesses that devalue what recruiters do so at their peril, because we can add huge value to organizations. And many of them have said that to me over the years. This team that you recruited for has made a massive difference. Yeah. And we can see it time and time again. And the difference between placing, a good person or even better, the absolutely right person in a job and the wrong person is massive.
Totally.
So, we did a piece of research years ago where we asked employers, if you could hire one person with the winning mindset, as we called it, how many other people, ordinary hires, would you exchange that one person?
Yeah.
And the answer was 7. So they'd trade 7 people for one with the winning mindset. So that's an indication of the value. So I think we're doing really important work for the organizations, employers that we work with. And I think it's really important to stress this for the individuals themselves, because we're helping people, we're enabling people progress in their lives and careers.
Yeah.
And that's really so important. And we do quite a lot of work, and we have done over the last 20 years with people who've been made long-term unemployed.
Sure.
And when you see the difference that progressing and getting a job makes to those people, it's huge and incredibly sort of rewarding and satisfying. So I think what we do as recruiters is really important. I think I feel very proud of it.
I agree.
And I'm always prepared to stick up for it when challenged. When sometimes an employer in negotiations say, well, you don't do much, do you? Just send us a few people over. Well, how wrong is that? We've invested years and years of effort, capital, technology, brand to build a business. And that's true of every recruiter that's successfully working in the market.
I think that's correct. And I think when I'm challenged on fees, or someone challenges the industry on our fees, I would flop that back to them and say, what price would you put on someone being in your business for 5 to 10 years? And you can't put a price. And when you extrapolate that out, finding that right person, the cost of getting it right and the cost of getting it wrong. I mean, again, that's another misconception, isn't it? The value of what we do I think it's underestimated.
Someone was asking about the fees the other day, challenging our fees on something, and they'd hired quite a lot of people, and they'd hired a senior person. And I said, so you don't think the last person we found for you added that much value? You wouldn't pay that again?
Yeah.
And they said, well, hang on a minute. No, that's not the case. They absolutely have. And so when you look at it in the sort of context of what someone's contribution is, for a good person who's highly skilled, who's going to bring a lot to the party, the fee should fade into insignificance.
There's a couple of things you mentioned about what's involved and also mindset. I think I'll do what's involved first, because it's not just as simple as getting a JD and matching that CV to that JD. I think that a really good recruitment consultant takes a holistic view of the problem that they're solving. What would you say to that?
Well, I think they really need to understand the problem that they're seeking to solve. So having a really strong relationship with the client, with the employer, knowing their business, understanding the particular needs of that role, I think is really important. Understanding the culture of the business, so that the sort of more sort of sensitive and empathetic and inquiring the recruiter is, the better.
Yes.
And then similarly, they've got to really be, obviously we're seeking a match, aren't we, to do the same. With the applicants. So that's a real skill, and it takes a sort of, you can develop it over time, and almost ultimately it's an intuitive understanding of business and people that makes a recruiter really effective.
On that intuitive piece, I think one of your books is called the 7 second CV, should I say?
Yeah, it's a bit of a tongue twister.
7 second. I'll get my words out as the host. I believe that a lot of recruiters do that as well, but how can they justify that to a candidate?
Well, the thesis or the premise of the book is that employers or recruiters will look at your CV for 7 seconds in the first, which is based on research. So I think that's the reality that many applicants have to live with. So how do we help you stand out? And it's really about thinking about what they're looking for. How am I the solution to their particular problem?
Yes.
And presenting yourself in that way. Obviously, and importantly, you have to do that honestly and accurately. But that's what you need to think about, is sort of put yourself in their shoes and think, what are they looking for? What's the problem they're seeking to solve? And to what extent am I the solution? I think we say this to a lot of people who are applying for jobs or haven't been looking for a long time or been out of work. How are you the solution to their problem? A job I firmly believe is a problem to be solved. So, are you the solution, Chris? That's the question ultimately, or that's the question that the employer sitting opposite you is going to be answering for themselves. Yeah,
and you touched on mindset. One of my businesses is called Base Mindset, and the base stands for behaviors, attitudes, skills, and experience, because I believe that behaviors and attitudes are as important or more important than skills and experience. What I mean is that a lot of companies, they hire on skills and experience, and they'll fire on behaviors and attitude, and it should be the other way around. That's my view. and reading some of your literature, I believe you feel the same about that.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say that mindset trumps skills, actually. And that's more important because especially now where things are changing so fast, skills come and go, don't they? I mean,
Absolutely.
You know, the code that you were good at writing 3 years ago is less and less relevant now.
Yes.
So you know, the mindset that you bring is so important, and that was the basis of the research that we did a decade ago now for a book that I wrote with a co-author, Paul Stoltz from America, called "Put Your Mindset to Work."
Right.
And that actually showed that when pushed to make a decision, if you ask an employer, you have two applicants. You know, who would you choose? The one with all the skills for the job, but not the desired mindset.
Yes.
Or the one with the desired mindset but not all the skills. 94% chose mindset ahead of skills. So, but employers say that when pushed, but do they actually do that when they're looking at these CVs and making choices? And often I ask people who've made a poor hire, you know, did you think at the time?
Yeah.
Did you think at the time did you have any sort of anxiety or any sense that you might be making a mistake? And so often they say, yeah, I had a feeling
intuition.
That it wasn't quite right, or I didn't really think that they were ideal, but they had it all on paper. And I think that's where we should perhaps listen a bit more to those little voices.
Right. I was having this discussion with one of my clients, and he was discussing it with his client that there were two candidates going for a role. One candidate did this kind of special test and he got 80%. The other candidate got 50 or 60, but they took the candidate that got 50 or 60 because they believed he took them on the journey. They bonded with him better, and the other guy kind of gave up after too easily, whereas the other guy who got less results, less skill, or was less on paper, kind of less relevant, they felt he was a better fit for the culture and the journey and the values of the business. And sometimes I think we get bemused by clients' decisions, or they don't even know why they say yes or no. I think there's a real science behind that.
Well, I think perseverance is a really important human quality. So if the applicant who had maybe a less developed skill set showed more perseverance in sort of wanting to develop their skills and in seeking to answer those questions, then that would make them quite an attractive candidate for me. And I suppose someone who threw in the towel too soon, you'd think, well, why did they do that? So, yeah, I think that's a highly relevant thing to look for. I mean, what you really want is the person who brings both to the party.
Of course.
And you know, as a worker or entrepreneur, you try and bring both to the party, don't you? Or if you're trying to be successful in your career, you want to develop really good skills and you want to have a strong mindset. So, you know, you can pick those things up, you know, all around you. You can learn things every day about how to develop your own approach and also new skills. So that's what we look for, but I can see why that answer arose in that situation.
There's quite a few more recruitment-related questions I think I'm going to save for later on. This is the Purpose-Led Leadership Podcast. I'm a passionate advocate of, once you've defined your purpose in life and in business, then you've got a great chance of actually achieving success in a fulfilled way. I'm not sure how large Reed is. I think it's more than £1 billion in terms of annual revenue. Correct me if I'm wrong. How do you define your purpose? What is your purpose? You know, when you've reached that kind of level, what's it all about? Why are you doing it? Yeah,
well, it's a good question, and it's a very important one. And the purpose we have at Reed is very simple. It's 4 words, and it's improving lives through work. And we seek, you know, as investors, to pursue business activities that do that. We want. What I like about that purpose in its simplicity is everyone can do that every day they come to work in one way or another. So I hope, you know, by doing this podcast, if I give someone out there an idea or a thought that they can use that I've maybe made a little progress against that purpose.
Sure.
So that applies to everyone in our business, and everyone, I think, can bring something to that particular purpose every single day. And it goes back to our family and what we're about as a sort of entrepreneurial family.
Yes.
So we also have very simple values in our business, and they're non-negotiable. You know, we're fair, open, and honest. We take ownership. And we work together, and that's it.
Teamwork.
We work together, and you know, they're very important to us because they're our family's values, really. So what I think is interesting in business is things that, you know, people are always asking, what's going to change, what's next, what's happening. And the change is sort of ever present. But I think you want to ask yourself, what's fixed, what's constant. And that's where the purpose and the values
Yes.
sort of come in.
It evolves, I guess, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, improving lives through work is something we've been doing in a way since 1960.
Yeah.
But the way we do it and the breadth of service offerings that we do has really changed. So, as I mentioned, we do more work now with people who've been long-term unemployed. We never used to do that. We do learning and development. So there are new things coming. We're doing well-being. So there are new things that we're offering.
Because people think, a big, large corporate organisation such as yourself, the myth, or it might not be, is that there's no identity. You're not really much sales involved. You're essentially order takers. I've seen this being discussed. And people are leaving corporates or setting up on their own because they want that entrepreneurialism. They want that freedom. They don't want to be, the same as everyone else. So how have you maintained a culture of kind of progression and continual development and all that kind of stuff without kind of, being Mr. Corporate or Mrs. Corporate? I mean, in terms of things like dress code, there's work from anywhere. There's all this kind of stuff that you've had to contend with recently.
Oh yeah, people used to hate our dress code. I used to wear a reed tie religiously. It sort of went with the pandemic.
Yeah.
But we don't have that dress code anymore. But that was one of the things that sort of grated with people. And dress codes are sort of, I think they're largely a thing of the past. But then there are so many sort of informal dress codes, aren't there, in different sort of business cultures. But it's a good question. I think the bigger a company becomes, the harder it is perhaps to maintain that sort of family ethos. That when you know everyone and you know what's happening in their lives, that's obviously a different type of environment to where you've got 5,000 people. And
of course,
many have only joined recently. So, in the pandemic, we had some people join and leave that we never met because they were all working remotely. And I think this remote working makes it more difficult in some ways.
Yes.
But I suppose it's to do with the culture, and I think that the founder or the entrepreneurial origin story is very important in a business.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
To sort of give you a sense of what our family, our business has very humble origins, and that and we I hope remain true to that.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not sort of. We're fairly frugal in our approach. We care about people. We want to do a good job for our customers. That's really important to us. So the origin of the company will have a big bearing on how it grows and develops. I hate it when people leave our business, as they inevitably do, because I always feel they take a bit of the company with them.
Yeah.
And some people. Tomorrow I'm going to be meeting a colleague who's been with us 40 years, and we're celebrating her. Over a brunch in Stratford, East London. I'm really looking forward to it. She's a wonderful woman who's done a fantastic job for 40 years now.
Wow,
so we do have quite a lot of people in our business who've been with us a long time. She's an outlier, but every year we celebrate those people. Anyone who's been over 10 years with the company, we invite to a special lunch at the Ritz Hotel. They get a sabbatical for 6 weeks, paid sabbatical. So we put a premium on sort of loyalty and tenure, and I think for a lot of people that's important. I think loyalty is important.
It is.
Ultimately, it's a relationship, isn't it, between a company and the people who work in it. So we try and do those things, but I don't expect anyone to stay forever.
No, of course
and of course they don't. I just hope they stay long enough to make an impact and enjoy themselves, and then whatever they do next, that they continue to progress.
I think that's the important part. Unless someone leaves under a real dark cloud, I think the mantra ideally should be red carpet in and red carpet out. So champion the person that leaves. And I always got a sense of pride of not just building my business, but the people who left my business to go on to build their own businesses. I got a lot of pride out of that, because when you use the word family, although you've got some great examples of people being with you for 20, 30, 40 years, which is phenomenal, we can't expect people to stay for life either, right? Would you say?
No, I haven't heard that red carpet in red carpet. Our sort of bar was slightly lower. My father said to me years ago, he said to me, I don't want to have to cross the street if I see someone who used to work for me.
Yeah, they did to me, yeah.
And you know what? And I, sometimes I feel, is this the right? I've never been to a leaving party.
Right.
Not once in 30 years of the company.
It's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, but it's not because people haven't left. I just think, I wish them well, but I'd rather put my energy and emphasis on the people coming in or the people who are there than who are sort of leaving. But we have a wonderful network of former colleagues and who remain friends and champions of the business. Many of them are clients. And I suppose that's what you want to create, isn't it? A period in one's life or career is like a chapter in a story. And you want people to think that their chapter at Reed was a good one and a happy one and one that they're pleased that they participated in. I'm glad that's over. Let's move on. So, I hope they leave with it. I feel sad when people leave. I mean, you see on LinkedIn now, don't you? People putting posts all the time, I'm moving on. And that brings it home a lot because, oh, no, she's gone. Or, So it's fairly visible now
on LinkedIn. I mean, I might be wrong again. I think Reed Online, your website, has about 18 million active users. Is that there or thereabouts? So I got that right, which is good. And LinkedIn, I guess you'd see that as an ally and also maybe as some sort of competitor as well. What's your view on LinkedIn, personal branding, all that kind of stuff?
Well, many years ago, LinkedIn invited me to lunch.
Oh, right.
I was slightly surprised. Yeah. And the guy, the host, I probably shouldn't say who it was, he began the lunch by saying, we had at one point thought we wanted to kill you.
Right.
I hope this invitation is a sign you changed your mind. And indeed it was. But I mean, he was just being friendly. But I think LinkedIn has been a great service to recruiters, clearly, because it brings a lot of people to our attention that maybe we might have missed, and we all use it. I think it might also have meant that some business goes in-house in ways that it perhaps didn't before. And I suppose over time I've grown. I'm a fiercely competitive person, but over time I've grown to think of how can we make competition an opportunity.
Sure.
And I suppose that began when we enabled competitors to use read.co.uk.
Yes.
So we effectively converted competitors into customers.
I think that's such a new way of looking at it. Even when I was doing it back in the 90s and noughties, it was like the competition were the competition, and it was let's not give up market share. But I think there's an age of kind of collaboration, and there's enough abundance. There's enough out there. Why not join forces, but why not complement and collaborate rather than compete?
Yeah, I suppose crudely, if you advertise a job online and you get 20 applicants, only one of them is going to get the job. Where do the other 19 go? And if you can market them out to other agencies or make that work for you and for them, then that's good for everyone, isn't it? So I think the market with these developments that have been enabled by technology has become more efficient.
Yes,
and that enables us to reach more people, and I think some of the challenges we're having to recruit for are more complex as well. So we have obviously managed service agreements where we have multiple agencies in support, where we're supporting local authorities with every range of worker, from gardener to social worker.
Yes, of course.
You need a good bunch of friendly suppliers to make that happen, and that's so we're very networked now, aren't we? Perhaps in a way that we weren't in the 90s.
I think we are. In terms of the CV, there was a post by Stephen Bartlett, the Dragon, and he said that personal branding is the new CV, and I kind of agreed with that to an extent. But how do you feel the CV is going to change moving forward? Do you think it's going to become obsolete? Do you think personal branding is going to be that important? Because I think the mechanic of introductions is changing, isn't it?
Well, the thing with branding is, if I ask you to name some brands, they're quite likely to be big, well-known. People say, well, Virgin, don't they?
Richard Branson or Nike.
Richard Branson, he doesn't need a CV, does he?
No, hopefully not.
But is that true for the rest of us? And the great function that the CV serves is it's a sort of little, it means summary of my life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a little summary on effectively a postage stamp that gives that someone can get some input or data from in 7 seconds. It's not ideal, but it's sort of been resiliently persistent. I mean, people still ask for them, they still look at them, and we try to create a new version of it, called the See Me. I remember when we did the Put Your Mindset to Work, which had more information about your sort of mindset and attitude, behavioural qualities that we were talking about, but it didn't fly. Right. And so the CV is still there, and it's interesting. When we went online in the 90s, magazine Management Today, which is quite a well-regarded business publication, saying, isn't it amazing? In the future, people might apply for jobs on email. Sort of thing. You might have an electronic CV, but it's still a CV.
Of course.
So I think I feel it's. I think it's worth putting some time and attention into your CV and keeping it up to date.
Yeah.
So because it's still a document that has currency, and I think it will.
Yes, I think you're right. Certainly for the foreseeable. You touched on mental health and well-being. If I may, I want to delve a bit more into that around your own mental health journey. Any kind of instances where you've struggled with that, and the importance of it in the workplace as well.
Well, I guess I've been lucky to the extent I haven't struggled with it severely, but I have ups and downs, and like everyone, I think.
Absolutely.
And there are most days I'm keen to get out of bed, but not every day.
I was going to say, what gets you out of bed?
So some days I think, I quite like to hibernate for but I think it can be tough, and I think it's particularly we've had a lot of challenges lately. With very significant changes in our working lives and circumstances because of the pandemic.
Absolutely.
And now, the state of the world is also very concerning, and that causes understandable anxiety, I think. So that affects different people in different ways. And I think for some people, the working from home thing was a positive.
Yes.
But for others, it really was not.
No.
And I think that the sort of way that technology has worked has been brilliant in terms of keeping the show on the road.
Yeah.
But it has sort of made people more isolated from one another.
I agree.
And it's created distance. And I think it's important, I feel as a sort of business leader, to get that balance right now.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be sort of forcing people back into the office, but I do think it's good to meet up.
I've had this debate on LinkedIn, and I feel that people generally sometimes need to be careful what they wish for, because I feel that we've been conditioned over the last 2 years to kind of accept and almost enjoy the work from anywhere, work from home thing. But now the weather's better and there's less restrictions, people are gradually going back. And I feel, being a Ned into quite a few different businesses, there is some hangover around using that card of I've got mental health, or I'm not comfortable going back into the office. And I feel that the longer that goes on, the actual more detrimental it can be.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of social anxiety. I remember myself being invited out, to a friend's dinner or something. I was thinking, hang on.
Yeah, we all get that.
Yeah, but this was particularly after the pandemic. And we were talking about it the other night, and everyone feels that. And I think that when you go back out or you go and see people, you suddenly feel good again, or it feels better.
Of course.
So it's good to talk to people. And if you're not able to talk to people, I think the problems or the anxieties you have in danger of building, because it's so helpful talking. I think that the mental health has become more challenging as well because of social media.
Yes.
And I see that quite a lot.
Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I have teenage and young adult children, and my youngest daughter says she's at Instagram, for instance, she really likes.
Yes.
But she feels it makes her unhappy. But she still uses it, or she's trying to get off using it. And so almost like a sort of a bit of an addiction. And that she wishes it didn't exist, or says to me things like, what was it like before, when you didn't have all this? And it's an extra thing.
We seemed to cope fine back then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It was an extra thing for people. You know what? I think people were more present back then.
Yeah.
You go out now and you see people everywhere on their phones with other people.
Yeah. Even the most iconic of sporting moments, you look at the crowd, 99% of them are actually on the phone trying to get the best shot. They're not actually, as an example, with holidays and things like that. I'm not saying that I don't do that, because I do, but
we all do it. I mean, they're sitting. Yeah. So that. But I think people were more present for each other before that. Yeah, and that was probably more valuable than generally sort of acknowledged now.
On that point, you've been around longer than I have, but in terms of leadership, I think leadership's changed quite a lot, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, and even more so in the last 2 years. I think there is more. Talk about currency. The currency used to be the size of your house, watch, car, your status, or or being motivational and inspirational as a leader. But I think great leadership qualities such as curiosity, gratitude, vulnerability, compassion, empathy, thankfully are coming into the full. And people say that they're the softer skills. I think they're actually the hardest skills to master and the most impactful skills. What would you say to that?
I think ultimately leadership's a relationship, and those qualities are very important in relationships.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
So if you're not showing gratitude or humility, then your leadership will sooner or later be in trouble, I would say. So,
but when I was working for a big recruitment company, they pushed us hard, and it was right back then. It was the number of calls that you made. It was how long you was on the phone for. It was how many hours you were doing. It was how. And I think that was right then, but what was right then isn't necessarily right now. So
what's changed, you or the world?
Well, I think hopefully me, but I think that generation were motivated by that. This generation are completely different, and I think they've got a different set of skill sets. They've got a different mindset, and they want different things. I don't think it's about money as much. I think it's about development and learning. What do you think?
I think having a shared and common purpose is really important. If you're clear about what you're trying to do, and that if everyone's bought into that, I think that's really
I agree
important. And I think you see, the leadership has had a bit of a crisis. When you at the top level, when you look at politics and what's in the media and stuff, and it's but there are still, I believe, lots of really good leaders around, and there might be team leaders, business leaders, sports leaders, and you can look and learn a lot from them. Jurgen Klopp, I'm not a Liverpool fan, but I think he's a fabulous guy.
He's great,
and I can see why that. And the sort of statements he put out around the pandemic and things I thought were spot on, and I can see why his team is sort of motivated and galvanized by him.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, and he seems to have he seems to be in touch with the people around him. He's not sort of remote.
I think what I get from him is, to interrupt you slightly, he knows which leadership hat to wear to whom and to when. What I'm trying to say is that I think he's quite agile, and sometimes he'll give someone a fucking bollocking, if I may swear.
It's your podcast.
Well, just so I check. I'm sure you're used to swearing in your career.
I've heard that word before.
Funnily enough. Whereas I think there are leaders that I think they're quite one-dimensional in their approach.
Yeah, I think you need to bring versatility to your sort of leadership, and I think
swearing and everything.
I think what's sort of managed anger, I suppose, I call it, rather than just blowing off completely, is actually quite an important aspect. If something's really unacceptable, you need to make that clear.
Appropriate anger, it's important.
And I mean, but it shouldn't be uncontrolled anger.
No.
Because then you lose a lot of power.
Yes.
People end up laughing at you behind your back.
Yeah.
So but when it's appropriate, it is appropriate. And I think feedback is an important part of leadership. Letting people know when you think it's going well and they're really helping towards that common purpose, and when you think maybe that's not the case.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people struggle with being direct and honest with people.
Sure.
So when we say we are valued to be fair, open, and honest, I would give someone honest feedback.
Yeah, but don't water it down afterwards.
No, I mean, but it is. Someone described, the way we take on information. Like negative information. It sticks to us like we're Velcro, and positive information bounces off us like with Teflon.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and that is true. I think you might get half a dozen pieces of feedback. The one you sort of focus on is the next. So it's worth bearing that in mind when you're giving people feedback.
Yeah,
but I think it's an important part of being honest with them.
Yes.
So I'd say this, and some people disagree with me, but I think ultimately people fire themselves.
Okay.
So either because they haven't done the job competently, or they're not able to deliver on whatever it was they were contractually hired to do, whether it's to make a certain number of placements or deliver a certain service.
Yeah.
Or because they let themselves down on an issue of integrity, shall we say? So there's the trust is broken, and I say to younger managers or leaders that because often it's a big deal for a young person to confront that and dismiss someone or ask someone to leave, or say we're not continuing with your probation or whatever it is. That individual has done that themselves. All you're doing is acknowledging it. So that's I think important, really. I mean, obviously there's a situation. The situation where that's not the case is where there are redundancies because there's been a business failure or some sort of economic crisis, and the company has to contract. Clearly, then people are losing their jobs not because it's their fault, but because of a change in circumstances. But otherwise, I think there's some merit in that argument.
What's your view on, just to go a bit more deeper onto the kind of things like pronouns, woke culture, D&I, work from anywhere, work from home? Do you feel that the employee is wagging the tail more than the employee used to be? I mean, I think I sense there is a dichotomy to what it was like 20 or 30 years ago, but I think we're at a bit of hiatus as to what's going on in that regard at the moment.
Well, I think the world's changed hugely, and I think that worker has a lot more power now than they did 2 years ago before the pandemic.
Sure.
And you know what? I think that's a good thing because overall, I think it will lead to a fairer deal for more people. Yeah. I think it will improve family life because people can work from home or they can have a bit more flexibility around when they work. I think the 9 to 5, 5 days a week is dead. Yeah, me too. Frankly. Yeah. And you know what? I'm not mourning. No. Some business people are, but I'm definitely not. Yeah. And I think it's great that people, we've got young parents and they can maybe take a couple of hours out early in the evening, late afternoon to pick up their kids, do their homework, give them something to eat, and then they go back to work if they want to. Yeah. And ultimately, what I care about is their success, their productivity, the service that we're delivering. Yeah. And if that's happening, I'm less concerned with the precise details of when they're doing it.
Yeah, of course.
But it does lead to potentially some sort of fraying around the edges where you can't necessarily, I think, share information with people quite so easily. If the new hire was sitting next to you and you were on the phone, they'd be picking up how you led the conversation, how you ask questions. And if they're sitting at home in another town, they're not doing that. And so how we sort of onboard and integrate people, I think, is really
that's important.
But I welcome these changes. On the whole, I think they're good. I think it's given people the possibility to be themselves more. Okay. And I think a lot of what we had before dates back to the sort of industrial revolution when sort of big factories were built and everyone had to travel to work in them for long hours.
Yes.
And before the industrial revolution, work wasn't like that.
No.
You'd work where you lived.
Yeah.
You'd typically be engaged in something artisanal or agricultural, but you'd be work in your local area. And perhaps we're going back to something like that, which I think suits the human condition better, frankly.
It was International Women's Day recently. What do you think men can do more of to help women in the workplace?
Well, we had a very interesting, we had a panel discussion at Read Online for International Women's Day where we had women leaders talking about their experiences, talking about what they would like to happen. And I asked the question, how can we support you? And one of the questions or responses was sort of a mentoring structure.
Yeah.
And I think men can mentor women lead. Ultimately it's about leaders, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so leadership. So I think mentoring and support is one. I think listening is so important. A lot of the women would say that they'd make a point in the meeting. The guy next to them would make a similar point, and then everyone would acknowledge what that person
That's true, actually, yeah.
And sort of just listening and being clear about, well, actually, Kathy said that first, and I'm going to acknowledge Kathy, not Brett, who piped in late. So sort of giving them, the right share of voice, share of input, and acknowledging it, I think was something else that was.
I think. Across the board, but particularly at the top table as well on your leadership team, I think you have to have that balance of male and female. I think we are human beings, but I do think males and females do make decisions based from different places as well. And I think it's good to have a blend.
I think it's really important. And our business at Reed is 58% women.
Right.
So, we would be nothing without them. And so that's absolutely right. And so we have our own Women in Leadership initiative where we seek to increase the percentage in leadership roles. It's not 58%, it's just below 50 at the moment, but it's improving all the time. And I made my own commitments to support that.
Yes.
So the other thing we do, interestingly, at Reed is we have a charity called The Big Give.
Okay.
And our business is 18% owned by a charitable foundation. The Reed
really?
Family.
Right.
And so this Women's Day, we launched an appeal for over 100 women's charities through our Big Give platform.
Yeah.
And we raised over $1 million so far for different charities that support women and girls in differing areas.
Brilliant.
So that's the first year we've done that. And I hope that will grow and become a feature of what we do at that time of year.
The phrase "nice guys come last," I heard Gary Vaynerchuk dismiss that, and I agree with Gary Vaynerchuk around. I think you can be a nice guy and be ruthless and be successful in business. And I've only just kind of met you properly today, but I think if we go right back to your younger days, in your teenage days and your early 20s, you talked about. You did some stuff for the Afghan refugees. You've done some stuff for the prison service. I think you're very charity focused, and I feel that because you've got a purpose, I think that's been the catalyst as to how you've grown the business. And I want to go back to purpose. And I think that being an arsehole, being this dictatorial old school leader, always catches up with you in the end. And I feel you're a shining example where you can actually have purpose, be a nice person, and have success, not just financially, but also those other elements as well. What would you say to that?
Well, I hope I'm not an arsehole. That's starting with, I mean, some people...
Some might say that.
I know there are people out there that think I am because for various reasons, I get feedback from various things. So you make decisions. I suppose I always try and make decisions that I feel... ethically I could stand behind and that are right for the business. So, that might mean I have to ask someone to leave or have to make a difficult decision about a business operation or unit that we're not going to carry on. But I always think, if you have to make a difficult decision, it's then about how you go about it. So I've had to go. So we had to close a contract down in the past because something had gone wrong, and I made the point I wanted to go there in person and tell everyone who worked there that this was happening. And that's not a nice thing to do, but I think it's the right thing to do. And then they can ask you questions directly.
Right.
And they might be very unhappy about that decision, but at least you've had an opportunity to explain it to them. And importantly, hear what they have to say, because there might be things that you learn or can do that will improve it for them or for the business in some way. So that's why I think it's, this idea you just send a junior person to tell them that,
to do your dirty work.
You're all redundant, or you send a message. I think it's wrong because, they have an opportunity to ask you about it, but you also have an opportunity to hear from them. And I think that's important. So I think there's a way of working that is good for the business, and I hope ethical, that is sustainable ultimately. Because we're in this for the long run. We want to keep building our business. Longevity is important to us. So we want to we want to do the right thing because we want to look our kids in the eye and say, this is a great company and you come and join us. But we also want it to be sustainable. So I think you have to try and work in a way that is. And if you behave really badly or you treat people with disrespect, that doesn't get forgotten about.
No.
So, so I think there's a sort of sustainability aspect to it. And we feel really strongly, we live and work in a community that if the business is able to support people who are in difficulties, or the charity that's doing good work, then why not? Why would you not want to do that? And so we're sort of, the way we're set up now with our foundation owning 18% means that one day a week everyone in Reed works for charity.
Right.
And people love that. And people when they think of joining the company like that, and I love that. I think because the money that we make on that day goes into the foundation fund, and then it's used for all sorts of different charitable causes. So
I think that's brilliant, and I think this is where I think society and work has changed. And every time I say this, I still get flack from people saying, "No, you're not." But I still stand by it. I think money isn't necessarily the number one reason why people work or set up recruitment businesses or go into recruitment. I do believe that that kind of stuff people go for more these days than they ever have.
Well, people ask me, why do you still work?
Yeah.
No, I guess I'm a certain age and I've got some money. But I can't imagine not working. I mean, I love it. And it's because we're able to make an impact. We can make a difference. We can reach more people. We're through our efforts, we can change things. And why would you not want to do that?
Yeah.
So I think that is very closely tied to purpose. And for me, it's energizing, it's motivating, it's rewarding. And I guess ultimately it's what you're about.
What's your proudest moment so far?
Oh, becoming a dad.
Oh, wow. Okay. How many kids have you got?
I've got 6.
Wow. Blimey.
So, I mean, family's very important to me. But I think, in life, I think that's the other thing. We are all from, or we all have families in some shape, form, or other. And I think family's so important. And I think, I feel very lucky having a large family.
Sure.
So, I'm because it's a family company, where does business end and family begin, or the other way around? Yeah, it's sometimes quite blurred. It is, and that can be good and bad.
I agree,
but it's the way we kind of are. So, I feel Reed is an extended family, our business, and we're an entrepreneurial family at its core.
Wow,
and that's how we sort of approach things.
It's really interesting. A lot of people challenge that family thing and say, look, you can't treat business as family because complacency happens. You lose that kind of commercial edge. It's not like the cult comes into culture because it feels like no one can leave. But the dichotomy of that with Sir Alec as your father, as the founder, he's still on the bloody phones these days, isn't he? These days, he's still
on the payroll. He's 88.
Unbelievable.
So I don't think there are many companies. Was it 5 or 6 different generations? So he was born in 1934.
Wow.
So he still contributes, and he has ideas, he has suggestions. So he's worth his pay. So
amazing.
So I think that's great because you get such perspective. So when we had the financial crisis in 2008, and everything looked like it was tanking, and it looked really serious for the business. I'd never experienced that before. Yeah. And I said, well, what's your take on this? And he said, when you're going into a recession, it's very hard to know how long it's going to last. But in my experience, they last 6 quarters.
Right. Okay.
And you know what? He was exactly right.
Yeah.
It was quite reassuring just knowing that. Yes. It's like when you have a young baby and they cry all night. You think, how long's this going to last? But it doesn't last forever.
That's experience. Isn't it?
You sort of think, well, about 3 months, or if you're unlucky, 9 months. But
nothing lasts forever.
But that was very helpful to me at the time because it gave me a sort of framework to approach it in. And so some of those experiences, I found myself sort of talking about the 1970s today because I can remember the 1970s. In the 1970s, there was a war in the Middle East. Oil prices went through the roof. Right. There was hyperinflation, and then there was a recession.
A bit like now.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that could be the playbook we're going to see now.
Yeah.
And so we ought to think about that. How do you run a company in a high inflation environment? And for recruiters, another point Alec Reed made to me is it can be quite good.
Sometimes it can be an opportunity.
Because if you think about it, if you're charging 20% and the salaries are going up, your income goes up just automatically.
Sure.
So but how do you manage that and your workforce's expectations? And we've never run. Yeah. Well, people of my generation even have never run a company in a high inflation environment because the last time that happened was the 1970s.
Right.
And we're close to retiring. So this is interesting. So who do you ask your 88-year-old founder who can remember that stuff? So, it's interesting. So it's quite helpful.
What are you going to miss most about him not being around in the future? Because he sounds like he's probably your number one mentor, right?
Yeah, no, I find that's the hardest question you've asked me, and I miss everything about him. He's not only my father; he's a wonderful mentor, and he's a very original thinker. He's a very original. He's a brilliant man.
Yeah, of course.
And you don't meet brilliant people, but to have them as your father, it makes you blessed, really. So I'll miss so much. Above all, being able to pick up the phone and talk to him.
Yeah,
which is the case, I think, when anyone goes that you can no longer hear their voice or ask them a question.
So what about the legacy then in terms of when you go as well? Have you thought about succession planning?
Yeah, no, I think about that quite a lot.
If you ever do go.
No, well, we all go, don't we? I mean, we've got to think. I don't want to go anytime soon, and I hope I'd like the company to continue as a family company.
Right.
But is that possible? I don't know. It's much bigger than it was. It's more complex than it was.
How many people you got now?
5,000 people.
Right.
In a number of different business lines, from Read Online, which is quite high tech, and
Sure.
web business,
Sure, yeah.
Read in Partnership, which is very much sort of public service and delivering important public services, to Read Specialist Recruitment, which is obviously the original recruitment company. Those are the biggest, but then we've got other businesses as well. So I hope I've got 6 children, and several of them are interested in business or involved in business. So we'll see.
Is there a plan then? Because most businesses like to have a plan around in the next 3-5 years' time. We're going to get to this point where we might want to sell it or whatever. And I've noticed, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that you've had no external investment, you've had no acquisitions, you're completely organic. Is that right? And secondly, is there a destination in mind where you're going to give some of the business away to investors or even your employees?
Well, that is essentially correct. Yeah, the business has grown organically since that original £75 investment in 1960.
Wow.
And it's been self-funding. But my father did float the company, so it was a public company.
Okay.
I think between 1972 and then I took it private in 2003.
Oh, right.
So it was a publicly listed company for a period.
Yeah.
He rather unhelpfully said not long after he'd floated it that it was the biggest mistake he'd ever made. And then when I was then in charge as CEO, every investment analyst would ask me, but your father said it was the biggest mistake.
Right.
So I thought I'd better try and fix that mistake. So we took it private in 2003. And now the largest shareholder is actually the Reed Foundation, but then the families and various family members own the rest of it. So it's a family run and owned company, with the largest share being a foundation.
Yeah.
We don't want to sell it.
No.
We want to keep growing and building it. We're interested, as I said, in longevity, and I hope to continue to do that while I still can. I'd certainly like to do that for the next 10, 15 years if I'm
How do you stay ahead of the game then in terms of like innovation, technology? I mean, to get to whatever
we're just
billion,
over $1 billion turnover.
Is phenomenal. I mean, what's next?
Well, I think you have to, and that's one of our mottos. What's next? Yeah. And that's a question you should keep asking.
Yes.
And it's interesting, isn't it? None of us know what's next, but I think it's about floating boats all the time, trying to see, trying things, like having a go, and so. We're very interested in technology. We were the first recruitment agency to go online back in 1995.
Oh, right.
Wow. So we've continued that interest. And in fact, the people who were involved then, some of them are still with us now.
Yeah.
So we have our own, CRM system, for instance, that we've developed in-house.
Okay.
And we've got, obviously, the website. And we've invested a lot during the pandemic in our digital, what I rather pompously call our digital real estate.
Sounds great.
Try and upgrade our websites
Yeah.
and things and brand. Yeah. So we'll keep doing that. We've made some mistakes. We invested. I was trying to create a totally online contractor service for technologists.
Yeah.
And that didn't fly, and it cost us millions lost. But the ones that have worked have carried us on. So
yes,
we try and keep trying things, and I think you can sort of. If you get something right and it's working, you can then grow it quite quickly.
Yeah, I'd prefer
prefer
to do something, regret something I've done than regret something I haven't done.
Yeah. And start small, actually.
Yeah.
If it seems to work, then you put a bit more investment around it. Well, that's how we began as a business. One person in an office in Hounslow. So, if you start small and then grow it up from there.
We're kind of coming towards the last sort of 10, 15 minutes. It's been fascinating so far. Thank you so much. You mentioned the mistake that Alec made. What's been one of your biggest mistakes in business and in life?
Well, I think it's so important to trust people. And trust is so important, such an important part of business. But I suppose the ones that hurt me are where I feel my trust has been misplaced or,
Yeah.
So, I've had a senior colleague in the past who turned out to be dishonest.
Right.
And that was it my mistake not noticing it sooner? Possibly. But it was really difficult. And so I think the ones that sort of linger are those that sort of people-related mistakes.
Right.
And I mean, I suppose as recruiters, that might be because we're sort of most interested in people. But I think people-related because what I don't want to happen is if you have a bad experience and you find out that someone's been stealing from you, or as an entrepreneur, you don't want to then become distrustful of everyone you meet. That's a disaster.
Very true.
You've got to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
So you've got to so I have this sort of mantra of trust everyone and no one.
Right.
So, I want to give everyone fair go. Everyone gets a chance to do the job. But then you need to have checks in place. You need to be able to sort of, everyone in the business needs to know that any stone can be lifted up and checked. There's a sort of culture where everything is open if asked, that sort of thing. And I've had managers in the past who say, why are you turning up at the office without asking me, first? And I said, well, that's what I do.
Do you think it helps if you're like that yourself as the leader in terms of having a bit of vulnerability, being open to feedback, as opposed to just being a dictator?
Yeah, I think you should always be open to feedback. Yeah. It's one of the good things about writing books. You always get feedback on Amazon. Some of it can be quite harsh.
Let's delve into that, because one of them's about, is it where you see, one of the questions that I don't like is where you see yourself in 5 years, which most interviewees or interviewers ask. But you've got a book about interview questions, right?
Yeah, why you? 101 interview questions you'll never fear again. And that book is interesting. Those 101 questions, that book's got my name on it, but the reality is it was crowdsourced.
Right. Okay.
So we asked our customers, our clients, what's your favorite interview question? And we got hundreds and hundreds of questions back, and we put the most common and the most interesting in the book. So they're real questions being asked by real interviews.
So and that was one of them. Strengths and weaknesses is one, isn't it?
The sort of fateful 15 we call that. Yeah. These are, if you can get well prepared for the first 15 of the 101, you're pretty much covered for the whole lot. But they're really interesting. And where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? I don't know. I mean, are you asking me that as a question?
I wouldn't dream of asking you that.
No, because you think it's about.
You can ask it if you want.
Is it a good question?
It's one of those. It's one of those paradoxes.
It's not the one it would be most important to me as an interviewer.
But isn't it a paradox where the majority of recruitment businesses are good at recruitment for their clients, but terrible at it at their own recruitment for themselves? Why is that?
Do you think they are?
I think a lot of recruitment companies struggle to scale.
There's a lot of turnover in recruitment, but I think it can be a tough job. Well, maybe that's something we've done okay because we've been able to scale.
You're an exception, obviously.
I think it's really important to put the time. I suppose why is that? It might be because people rush to make a decision too quickly, or it might be because they're so busy they don't give it enough time and attention.
Yeah.
You do what's urgent over what's important.
Or I believe it's not even half the battle getting the individual through the door. It's the onboarding, induction, learning, development. It's the whole. It doesn't stop when they come through the door. I think that's
it just begins then.
That's a retention, isn't it? I think
it begins then. We have a business school out in the Cotswolds, which is an old. Looks like Hogwarts.
I want to go.
Yeah, no, people who do go, they sort of enjoy it. It's like a sort of, we have our induction week. Yeah. And they go in, but it's almost like a cultural sort of thing as well, because they get to know the company and each other and they enjoy it. And
brilliant.
I think that works really well important for us. So it's sort of interesting. But we don't get it all right. I mean, I wish people would stay longer. Our retention was better. I mean, recruitment companies struggle with that.
What do you think the biggest reasons why recruitment companies don't get to your level or don't scale in general? Have you thought about that? Which are not really.
Well, maybe because they haven't been at it for 61 years. Soon to be 62.
That's one factor.
You keep going.
Yeah.
Or you don't try and sell after 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, so I suppose just keeping going is important.
Yeah.
We've only got to this. Yeah, and we've had some pretty hard knocks along the way. I mean, I think recruitment is a very cyclical business. So we're all growing at the moment, and business looks good after the pandemic. But then you worry about, well, when's the peak and when's it going to go off? It's not going to be forever.
Yeah.
So, it's taking each cycle at a time and building on that and trying to make the right decisions. So, and I suppose it's wanting or prioritizing longevity, because I suppose a lot of recruiters think, well, we'll build a business for a bit and then sell it or do something else. And fair enough. I mean, that's a different strategy. It's not ours.
No.
So, that's how they choose to go.
Last few questions. I mean, I was born as a contract recruiter and then kind of evolved into perm, and I've got my views on it. A bit of a direct question. Which is the more sophisticated form of recruitment, or the most challenging, most difficult, contract or perm?
No, that's a difficult question. I mean, it depends on the client and on the specialism and what you're. I think if you're building a business, I always think contract or temp is very good business because but you need a lot of cash.
Well, it helps if you get recurring revenue, you get a good contractor book. It enables you to make much better buying decisions.
Yeah, and so at the moment, though, so if you were looking back over the last 15 years, contract and temp business would have probably been the better performer. But now it's perm.
Yes.
Because with this shortage of candidates and with clients in a hurry, they know they need people. The perm business is really good at the moment. And so we've seen the perm business recover more quickly from the last recession than the contract and temp. But I think the contract and temp, if you're building a business, is so important because it's the sort of sustaining element. And you have the ongoing relationship with the clients. So we have perm clients who might ring us once every couple of years, and it's good business. But the temp clients we're talking to every week. So
I mean, I was the archetypal 360 recruiter. I don't know whether I was too controlling, but I didn't want anyone to do any part of the process. And I think over the last 5, 10, 15 years, it's gone to like 180, 270, 190 even. It's like almost like, for me, it's like too many cooks spoiling the broth. Because the reason why I don't necessarily, I think there's a place for it, but I feel that if there's too many people involved in the process, it's a bit like when it goes well, it's great. When it doesn't go well, there's no accountability. What's your view on that? Because I know you've got some big accounts. You'll have some delivery team. You'll have some.
Yeah, we have elements in our business doing both. I'm surprised. The 360 recruitment's a bit like the CV. I mean, it's sort of very resilient. Still there. Yeah. I mean, because that's basically what Alec Reed started doing in 1960.
Sure.
So that's got longevity, and it clearly works. It doesn't work in every case or every situation, but it still has an important place in the market, I think.
Yes.
And we have other parts of the business where we do our talent solutions business where we're doing volume recruitment, and it's not done like that at all.
Yeah.
And that works as well.
Yeah.
So it depends very much on the circumstances and the preferences of the recruiter. What you want to do and what you obviously like doing that, and you were good at it. So why wouldn't you put someone who likes doing it and is good at it into a role where they can do well?
Yeah, I think learning all facets of the process is really important. I think rather than just one or two. I think it's important to do that. But you're right. You've got to put the right players in the right positions, haven't you, as well? And I also think that not everyone wants to follow the archetypal career ladder structure of consultant, senior consultant, team leader, manager, director. Some people might want to go into a different part of the business as well. So I think it's important to understand the individual, not just the team.
Well, I was talking to a friend who's in tech recruitment, and he's ditched 360 completely, and he says there are 3 aspects of the job: sales, relationship management, and resourcing, and they're divided up accordingly.
Oh, that's quite good. Quite like that.
Yeah. So that works for him.
Also, the importance of back office, right? I think of a business of your size. I mean, you must have had quite a few difficult situations with kind of chasing money and getting money. But I think one of the reasons why businesses do well is that they treat the back office with the same level of importance as they do the front office. What's your view on that area?
Oh, for sure. I mean, as I say to people, without our credit control team, no one gets paid. Because they collect the cash, and they really, and they get my absolute support. Because sometimes you get tensions, but particularly when people are on commission, there's some client who's slow paying, and they don't want to upset them too much, and this sort of thing. Well, the consultant doesn't, but the credit control is trying to get the money in, and in those circumstances, I always find myself backing the credit control.
Absolutely.
Because the terms were this, they should pay on time. And so I think you need to take a sort of holistic view of the whole business.
Yeah.
And, it's that old mantra about turnover,
vanity,
sanity and reality. And that's cash is the reality.
Totally.
So I'm very focused on cash. And I look at our cash in the business every morning and every evening.
Right.
And I've done that ever since I
Wow.
took over as chief executive more than 25 years ago.
I wonder you're doing well then.
Well, I'm just a bit obsessed with that because I like to say cash is the oxygen of business.
Sure.
So you can be running a profitable business and go bust if you run out of cash.
Totally right.
So, that's why I'm always looking at it, because I also know, we've got a big payroll to meet every week. We've got to pay 20,000 temps.
Yeah.
So, we don't want to get that wrong. We've never missed a
no.
payroll. And so it's important that our cash is well managed.
Last couple of questions. What's been your kind of darkest moment or the most challenging moment, and also your toughest business decision as well?
Well, it's interesting. Darkest moments. I was very worried in 2008. Well, there was a week in 2008 where the banking system looked like it was about to collapse.
Right, of course.
And I rang up our then finance director and asked, "Where's our money?" And he said the Royal Bank of Scotland and the other one with Scotland, it's like Bank of Scotland.
Right.
And they were the two that were about to go bust.
Right, yeah, of course.
So I was really, I thought that might be the end of the line for us, because if the bank went down that had our money in, we wouldn't be able to pay everyone on Friday.
Wow.
And since then, we've actually been more particular about dividing the cash up between more banks.
Yeah, you can't necessarily even trust the institution bank now. You just can't do that.
No, but that was new then. The idea that a bank would go bust in 2008.
Yeah.
Was incredible. So now we've spread it. But I thought that was a very worrying moment. And then when the pandemic began, and we were all told to go home, I was thinking, well, how's that going to work?
Yeah.
How are we going to manage that?
Yeah.
And you know what? People were amazing in their response to that.
Yeah.
And we were able to get people set up working from home very quickly. And it just showed how sort of flexible and resilient people were or are. And that was really inspiring. So in a way, those moments, they prompted great change in our business. So those moments that feel dark or challenging are often the moments where you make decisions that really change the future. And it's good to sort of be aware of that, really, or to hang on to that, because it feels horrible at the time. It's like when you're under great pressure, you then come up with good ideas.
It's often the case, isn't it?
Yeah. So, those were in business terms.
Fantastic. 2 more questions. I keep saying that, don't I? There's always 2 more questions. Is there anything interesting about yourself that people don't know?
Oh, I don't know. I'm maybe. so I love animals.
All right.
I've got a sort of menagerie of animals. And so I like riding and driving horses. I drive a horse and cart at the weekend for fun.
Oh, really?
In
Okay.
Wiltshire, where I have a home. And we've got dogs. And I've got a tortoise that which I've raised since it was a small little thing. It's now fully grown, which is called John Terry, after the Chelsea footballer.
Are you a Chelsea fan?
I am.
Oh, okay. But it was going so well, James, honestly. Anyway.
It was, but something else will happen. The tortoise is like a sort of family favourite.
That's brilliant.
So that, but yeah, and the other thing I suppose that not many people know is I stopped drinking alcohol 3 years ago.
Oh, well done.
Because I thought I didn't want to do that anymore, and I found that really liberating. I really liked.
Was there a reason for that?
No, well, sort of. I've just felt I've been drinking alcohol since I was sort of 15. I thought I'd have a break for a bit, sort of thing.
Fair enough.
And and I suppose in recruitment we go to a lot of parties. There's a lot of
of course.
It always used to be work hard, play hard, all of that. And I think it's quite nice to give
It's a really
rest.
interesting one to kind of suddenly just do that after decades of doing it. I think. What are the benefits?
I feel I suppose you feel great every morning.
Yeah,
and
it proves you that you don't need that external thing to be happier than what you were.
No, I feel happier for not doing it, actually.
Right,
and so I throw that in case anyone else is out there thinking maybe they do the same thing, because I found it really liberating.
Fair play to you. And in closing, then, if there's one thing the audience can take from this podcast, what would you like to leave them with?
Well, I think it's really important to find a job or work that you love, and to keep looking until you do, because I think that is there for everyone, and we can all find it, and it's sort of so important, really. Our marketing message, I suppose, is Love Mondays, but that sort of encapsulates it.
Sure,
is we all live just once, and it's a big part of our life is spent at work or working. So it's good to do something you enjoy.
Yeah.
If you possibly can.
That goes back to purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah, and don't give up until you find it.
James, absolutely humbled and honoured to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for, if I may.
Thank you, mate.
Show your hand. Thank you for
mate.
inviting
Enjoyed that.
me.
Thank you.
It was very nice talking to you too, Chris. Thanks.